We have an obsession over diagnoses. A diagnosis doesn't define who you are. You're so much more than the diagnosis. It's a label that the medical community uses to put on that subset of symptoms to make it easier to navigate the conventional medical world and for insurance billing. These symptoms are red flags from your body telling you that something's going on. We need to dig deeper. So when providers are telling women that have PCOS, you're never going to get pregnant, that's bogus. That's baloney. I think a lot of people are missing the mark of teaching you how to actually get to the root cause. Does your nervous system feel safe? Have you walked through a lot of traumatic things? Is there space in my life for a baby? Like, do I have my life set up and constructed in a way that a baby could come into the world, into my life, with ease? Welcome to Prescribing the Truth. I'm Dr. Nichole Morris, a Catholic naturopathic doctor and natural fertility expert. Around here, we don't just accept the mainstream narrative, we question it. My goal with every episode is to share the love of Jesus with you and empower you to make informed, confident decisions for you and your family. So grab a cup of tea, get comfy, maybe even throw on your tin hat, and let's dive in. Welcome to Prescribing the Truth. As you just heard, my name is Dr. Nichole Morris. I am a naturopathic doctor, expert in natural fertility, and I have been in the world of infertility for the past 15 years, both through my own lived experience and now with the clients that I serve. If you have been listening along, I appreciate you for being a fangirl or a fan guy. If you are new here, welcome. So happy to see you here today. We are going to dive in today to some of the things that I see as the main root causes of infertility. Now, I'm recording my first solo podcast today, which feels a little awkward and a little unnerving. So bear with me as we muddle through this together. But I am excited to kind of open or unlock a little bit of new potential here and come to you with my heart and my knowledge and hopefully really inspire you today in the world of root cause medicine, whether that is you are trying to conceive, get pregnant, have a healthy baby, or maybe that's not the stage of life that you're in right now. And that's okay too. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of how the conversation still applies to you in your life. Even again, if you're not in a season of trying to have a baby right now. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of my journey. If you've been listening along, you know I shared a lot about my journey in episode 1, but I'm going to get a little more granular into some more of the details today, because the longer that I'm in this world, the longer that I study infertility and I work with clients and I see patterns, there are things that become more and more evident to me with more experience, of course. And now I'm able to look back on my experience and say, oh, that was a piece of the journey for me too. I just didn't realize it at the time. Maybe I didn't even realize it years after. And it's a realization that I'm coming to more recently in the last few years. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. But before I really dive into more of my story and building the pieces out for you, just so that hopefully you can relate. It's not for a pity party. It's not for a sob story. It's just, this was my journey and yours might look similar. It might look different, but I think that you'll be able to relate to some of the points that I'm going to make. But again, before we dive into that, something that I really want to discuss and bring awareness to is the fact that in our society, I think in the developed world, probably, we have an obsession over diagnoses. I think we've really been ingrained as a society to crave a diagnosis. And when we have a diagnosis, it feels relieving. It feels like an aha. It feels like, okay, now I finally know what I need to do, what I need to work on. But I really want to point out and remind you that a diagnosis doesn't define who you are. You're so much more than the diagnosis. And I think sometimes we just gravitate to that or really latch on to that diagnosis and allow it to define us. Like, oh, I can't do that because I have X, Y, and Z. Oh, I can't eat that because I have X, Y, and Z. I can't go there because I have X, Y, and Z, so on and so forth, right? And so I want to remind you that a diagnosis is just a subset of symptoms. And it's a label that the medical community uses to put on that subset of symptoms to make it easier to navigate the conventional medical world and for insurance billing. If you have a subset of symptoms, your provider has to have a name to give to the subset of symptoms. It has to go with a code. That code has to be given to the insurance company so the insurance company can be paid out on that. So a diagnosis is very much a model for medical billing at the same time. And when I say a diagnosis is just a subset of symptoms, I want to kind of expand on that a little bit. So let's use IBS, for example. IBS is irritable bowel syndrome. Irritable bowel syndrome is not necessarily answers. It's not going to get you where you need to be. It's not going to help your body to heal, right? It just means that your bowels are irritable, and sometimes you might have diarrhea, sometimes you might have constipation, sometimes you might have gas and bloating, sometimes you might have abdominal pain, but no one really knows what's wrong with you. So we're just going to call it IBS. We're going to code that. We're going to send that to the insurance company, and now your provider gets paid. To give more of a fertility example, even PCOS. PCOS is just a diagnosis of a subset of symptoms, polycystic ovarian syndrome. So to be diagnosed with PCOS, you have to meet the Rotterdam criteria. So you have to have 2 of the following 3. Anovulation, so it means you're not ovulating. You have to have high androgens, either by blood work or symptoms. So either you have to have high testosterone, THCA in your blood work, or you have to have androgenic symptoms as a female, such as excessive facial hair growth, acne, hair loss on the head, kind of like that male pattern baldness, some of those symptoms. So you have to have anovulatory cycles. You have to have polycystic ovaries, meaning that you have a chain of pearls, we typically call it. So there's lots of too many follicles in your ovaries, essentially, and or high androgens by blood work or the symptoms that you're feeling. So again, it's just a subset of symptoms that we put a label on. We call that PCOS. Oftentimes women with PCOS also have high insulin. They have insulin resistance. And so we could focus on addressing the insulin resistance in and of itself. And then that's going to bring androgens down, because insulin stimulates the ovaries. There's insulin receptors on the ovaries that help to push out more testosterone. So when you have high insulin, the ovaries are affected. Now we're pushing out too much testosterone. So I don't want to go too much down that rabbit hole in this conversation, in this episode. But the point is just to demonstrate to you that, again, it's just a label over a subset of symptoms. And just because you have PCOS, it doesn't define you. It doesn't mean you can't get pregnant. Women with PCOS actually have fertility much longer than women that don't have PCOS, because they aren't ovulating as frequently. So when providers are telling women that have PCOS, you're never going to get pregnant, that's bogus. That's baloney. You have fertility longer than those of us that don't have PCOS. We just have to learn to work within the confines of your body and how your body is functioning, right? And work to heal your body. So again, the point of that tangent, if you will, is just to express that a diagnosis is just a subset of symptoms. And so often in the world of infertility, and I think just medicine in general, really, clients will say, we've been working together for X amount of time, and I just still don't really feel like there's a root cause. I don't feel like I have a root cause answer. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about that, right? Let's back up. Let's go back. Let's look at all the lab work that we've done. Let's look at your Dutch analysis. A Dutch analysis is urine hormone testing that is very in-depth. Let's look at all of our conversations and the notes that we have about everything that we've discussed, right? And I can usually say, okay, let's look at your labs. Well, I see that you have low iron levels. I see that you have low vitamin D. I see that your thyroid is maybe just like a smidge above where it should be, but thyroid levels a smidge above where they should be can cause infertility. We might be in a situation where inflammatory markers are a little bit high. So that could mean that LDL is a little bit high, the quote unquote bad cholesterol. That could mean homocysteine is a little bit high. And I have other conversations going more deeply into some of these labs, and I have lots of information on that on my YouTube channel. So if you're wanting to know more about these labs, I'd encourage you to head to the YouTube channel, and there's videos really deep diving into a lot of these things. But anyways, so the point is that it's not always this big diagnosis. In fact, I would say that it's rarely a big diagnosis. That's just what we want as humans. We've been conditioned to believe we need a big diagnosis. But in the world of infertility or just health in general, it's rarely a big diagnosis. It's just all these little things adding up, right? It's like, maybe we need to eat more red meat so that our iron levels can be higher. Maybe we have some gut disturbance going on, so we can't actually absorb the iron. Maybe we're vitamin D deficient. And so that tells us that our immune system is either using all the vitamin D because we have an underlying chronic infection, or we're not converting vitamin D well on our skin, and we need to, or from the sun to the skin to the liver and kidneys. And we need to dive into that. So it's all of these little things that add up. Maybe it's environmental toxins. I was chatting with a couple on the phone not too long ago, and we were talking about all these things to do with their infertility. And I said, something we haven't talked about much is the environmental impact. And she kind of chuckled. She goes, I work in a chemical factory. I'm like, okay, that is so important. And that would be so overlooked by the conventional medical model, whether we're talking fertility or we're talking something else, right? If you work in a chemical factory, we know that most chemicals are xenoestrogens. They mimic estrogen, and then they come into the body, and the body is freaking out because there's all these chemicals that look like estrogen. And now our hormones are all out of balance. And that is very much a root cause of disturbed health, infertility, so on and so forth. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it's not always this whopping diagnosis that sweeps us off our feet that explains where infertility is coming from or any other health conditions. It's often these little things that add up. An example that I use a lot and a lot of other providers use is a bucket. We're all born with a bucket, and your bucket fills, right? So our bucket fills at a different pace because we have different epigenetics. We were all born with different genetics and then epigenetics. So epigenetics are the experiences that your ancestors had that influence your genes that are passed down from one to the next, right? So an easy example of that would be someone surviving a famine, right, where there was no food and they starved. That influences their epigenetics, and that's going to be passed down. We know there are higher rates of obesity in people that come from ancestral lines of people that survived a potato famine. That's epigenetics. So we're all born with our bucket, and things fill our bucket. There may be a stressful experience that you had as a child, and I'm going to get into a lot of that because that's a lot of my story. But maybe you had this stressful experience. Maybe your dog died when you were little, right? So that is an emotional burden and that gets dropped in your bucket. Maybe you had exposure to, I have a few clients that had exposure to radiation from nuclear bombs. So maybe that was, a drop in your bucket. Or, these things just kind of accumulate and add up. Viruses, mold exposure, Lyme could be in there. Maybe you moved schools when you were a kid and that was really stressful. That's a drop in your bucket. So everyone's bucket fills up at its own rate based on our own lived experiences and our own toxicities, infections, things like that. And then when that bucket spills, that's when we see disturbance in health at its peak, right? We might feel that disturbance building as our bucket is filling and filling. And you might be thinking like, oh, I don't feel super great, but I'm doing fine. Like I can survive, and then the last thing happens and the bucket spills and you're like, whoa, like there's something wrong with me at this point and I need to address that. So our bucket fills, and that's really where the root cause of health comes in. I want to give another example that's not fertility related so that maybe it feels a little bit more relatable to you if you are listening in on this and fertility is not something that you're struggling with. So think hypertension. So hypertension is high blood pressure. A lot of times people will say like, oh, I have high blood pressure. Okay, that's not great. But why do you have high blood pressure? High blood pressure is not where it starts. You don't just all of a sudden have high blood pressure for no reason. There's a reason you have high blood pressure. That's a side effect of something else happening in the body. So when we have high blood pressure, oftentimes the arteries are constricting. They're becoming smaller. And as the arteries become smaller, there's more pressure on the blood in the arteries, and blood pressure is going to increase. As your arteries dilate or become wider, that releases the pressure on the blood, and your blood pressure is going to go down. So if you have hypertension or high blood pressure, what's happening in your body that is causing vasoconstriction of your arteries and causing blood pressure to rise, right? That could be an inflammatory issue. It could be an issue in your heart. It could be an issue in your kidneys. So we have to think backwards and get to the root cause. And the conventional medical model is missing that, right? If you just think to yourself, how many people do I know that are on blood pressure medication? And that's just it. It's just blood pressure medication. It's just a Band-Aid approach to decrease blood pressure because it's not good for your organs to have elevated blood pressure. But we're not getting to the root cause, right? So it's just a few different ways for you to think through the desire for a diagnosis. What actually is a diagnosis? What does a diagnosis mean? is there importance to having a diagnosis? And maybe just give you a little bit more perspective if you're dealing with a health-related thing, whether it be fertility or gut issues or chronic infections, right? Whatever it is, let's just think a step backwards and say, okay, what is actually the root cause of what's happening here? And I think that this is a medley or a tune that is beaten to death in the influencer world on Instagram. It's like, we have to be root cause, we have to be root cause. And that is really true. But I think a lot of people are missing the mark of teaching you how to actually get to the root cause and thinking through root cause. And okay, we all know we want to get to the root cause, but like, how do we do that? And what things are we looking for on a root cause level? So I want to kind of talk you through some of those root cause issues, specifically in the world of infertility, but root cause issues are pretty basic and they apply across health pretty generally. So I hope that you're able to kind of see that as we talk through this conversation, and I'll kind of point some of those things out for you as well. But as I promised, I'm going to share a little bit more about my journey with you, a little bit more granularly, to demonstrate a root cause that I see in my clients so frequently at this point. And really, again, like I said, it's not to share like a sob story with you and ask for pity. It's just to provide you something that might be relatable in helping you see like, oh, maybe this is part of my experience too. Maybe this is part of why I'm struggling to conceive, and provide you some insight and some guidance there. So one of the biggest things that I see interfere in the world of infertility is nervous system. From a very primal and animalistic perspective, your nervous system has to feel safe for you to be able to reproduce. If we just talk about animals for a minute, if an animal living out in the woods is in a state of starvation, they're not going to be able to reproduce easily, right? Say, I don't know, they're living in a place where there was recently a forest fire. And so there's no plants left to eat, no little animals, all the little animals died. There's not nutrition and food, right? That animal is not going to reproduce. Its nervous system is going to protect it from moving forward with reproduction, right? So the point there is not necessarily to compare us to animals, but I think just thinking about reproduction from a very animalistic standpoint of survival can be helpful in helping us see some of the things that might be holding our bodies back from conceiving. So the nervous system has to feel safe. It has to feel like it's the best next step. So your nervous system really has two parts. You have sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system is that fight, flight, freeze state. So this is, you may have heard an example of like the lion or the tiger in the jungle, right? If you are face to face with this lion or this tiger in the jungle, you have a few different options. You can fight it, you can flight it, you can run away, or you can just stand there and freeze and let it eat you, right? You have a choice, and your nervous system is kind of going to dictate what your body's going to do. But that's very much like this sympathetic nervous system. So if you're in that state, what do you need to be able to do? You need to be able to run fast, right? So you need to be able to breathe heavier. So your respiratory rate is going to increase. Your heart rate is going to increase. Blood flow moves to your extremities to give you what you need for survival. This is a very amped up state. Like just describing this to you, I can kind of feel adrenaline in my body as my body is like amping up in that state of survival. On the contrary, we have the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is the resting and digesting state. That's the state that we need to be in to digest our food, to be able to sleep, to be able to reproduce. That is the state in which your nervous system feels safe. It's not fighting for survival and, again, can reproduce. Unfortunately, in our world, so many of us are so stuck in sympathetic, that fight or flight, amped up, adrenaline cortisol state, that our body is sensing not safety, right? It is not safe to reproduce. That is not my main goal for you right now as your nervous system. I need to keep you alive. I just need to make sure that you are fed, that you can try to get some sleep every day, that you're safe, that a tiger's not going to eat you. And putting you in a state of reproduction is dangerous for you in this moment. That's what your nervous system is saying when we're so stuck in this fight or flight sympathetic state. And so we have to work really hard to pull ourselves out of that and into the parasympathetic state. And I'm going to kind of walk you through my childhood experience and some of the things that I've experienced in life to just kind of give you an idea of how that happens, because I think that sometimes it's hard for us to connect those dots there. So Again, not sharing this from like a sob story. You don't need to feel bad for me. My life, my life is great. It's good. Yes, I went through a lot of trauma as a childhood, through my childhood that most people I think would look at and be like, that wasn't trauma because no one physically hurt you. Right. And I think a lot of you may be able to relate to this. Some of you may have been in very unfortunate situations where you were physically harmed. Right. And that also is setting up your nervous system. But let me dive into kind of my lived experience. So, I was born, conceived out of wedlock. So that was very stressful for my parents, I have to imagine, right? So that's where it starts. It starts in utero. And if you allow me to actually go a step beyond that or before that, epigenetics really comes into play because the egg that formed you was formed in your grandmother. So a woman or a baby girl is born with all of the eggs she will ever have. So her eggs developed in her grandmother. So whatever her grandmother experienced, especially and namely while she was pregnant with your mother, is going to have a significant influence on who you are in your epigenetics, right? Okay, so back to me. So I was conceived out of wedlock. That was very stressful, I have to imagine, for my parents. So that stress manifested itself, if you will, for lack of a better term, into me and who I was going to be and my nervous system and all of my eggs that were going to form my babies, right? So going on from there, I was born all hunky-dory. At a year old, I was diagnosed with a blood disorder. I was covered with petechiae. And if you don't know what petechiae is, you can Google an image of it, or actually maybe my team will just pop an image up for you here. But it's like pinpoint little dots of blood all over the body where blood is essentially seeping from the arteries, and you can bleed out and die because your platelets are really low. So platelets make your blood clot. When the platelets fall, you're going to bleed out. It's kind of a big deal. So my parents rushed me to the emergency room, and the emergency room was like, this is child abuse. And my parents were like, no, it's not. And so my dad this is a story I was told. My dad takes off my diaper, flicks my butt, and all these little red dots show up. So they're like, oh my goodness, she must have a low platelet count. They wrapped me in a blanket, put me on my mom's lap, and they said, go now to the children's hospital and don't get in a car accident. If you get in a car accident, she's going to die. So I'm like a year old. My parents wrapped me in this little blanket. I'm not sure car seats were really even that useful 35 years ago, but they rushed me to the hospital. And that was the start of a very long, stressful childhood journey. From the point that I was a year old until I was 5 years old, I was diagnosed with ITP, idiopathic thrombocytopenia purpura. And so essentially that means idiopathic, we don't know why, low platelet count. So every few weeks, my platelet count would drop to the point where my body would become covered in petechiae. Again, that's that pinpoint bleeding. And so throughout this 5 years, every other day I would go to, I don't even know if we went to the hospital or the doctor's office or what it was, but we would go, I would get my blood drawn, and they wanted to save my veins because I had so many treatments as a child that they would poke my finger and like squeeze the blood out of my finger. And I was not the child who became used to this, you could say. I was the child who was traumatized by this every 48 hours. So we would go have my blood drawn, and about every 6 weeks, the results would come back. My platelets would be low. So that meant we were going to the hospital for a few days, in which at that time I would receive immunoglobulin, so IgG, essentially, for, I don't know, a couple of days. And then I would come home and we'd start the whole process over again, and this was about an every 6 weeks thing. So this lasted until I was 5 years old. I think I remember stories more than anything else. I remember, I was not a compliant child with this. So I remember being held down a lot of times. I think I have memories of photos maybe that we have that solidify those memories. But anyways, that was the first 5 years of my childhood. And so the story goes, as my mom tells me, that I believe it was December because it was the feast day of St. Nicholas. And a priest came in to the room that I was in the hospital. He prayed over me, and it was the feast of St. Nicholas, and my name's Nichole. So if you're Catholic, you understand he's my namesake saint. And the priest said, she's going to be healed. She's not going to be sick anymore. And I was not sick anymore. It's a very miraculous story. But that was the end of it. I didn't have low platelet counts from there, and it was great. Today's episode is brought to you by the Fertility Formula Masterclass. My team and I have helped hundreds of married couples conceive naturally without IUI or IVF. If you're struggling to get pregnant or stay pregnant and have been told there are no other options, don't stop searching. There is hope, and finding the root cause is key. If you want to learn more about how we can support you on your journey to motherhood, head over to drnicholemorris.com, and don't forget, Nichole has an H in it. All right, let's get back to the show. Stress while I was in utero, stress for the first 5 years of my life. As soon as that was over, I was 5. So shortly after that happened, my parents had shared with my brother and I that they were going to get divorced. So we were going from one very stressful scenario to the next. And I have very vivid memories of that even 30 years later. Still remember where I was sitting in the spot when we had those conversations and things like that. So as time went on, my parents decided not to get divorced, which is really beautiful and a happy ending there. But, you also have to understand, like, when you're in a situation where you're going to get divorced and then you don't, like, it's not just like rainbows and butterflies after that, right? Like, it can make for stress in childhood. And I had a really beautiful childhood, truthfully. Like, I never needed for anything or wanted for anything. I did feel very loved as a child, but there were these stressful things that happened. No one thought or said in 1995, like, oh, maybe this child needs therapy. Maybe this child needs therapy for medical trauma, right? Like, that was a very traumatic experience for me. And I wouldn't necessarily say that I was a mean kid, but I was like a kid in survival whose nervous system from 1 year old was in fight or flight because people were holding me down, sticking needles in me against my consent, right? And as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, you're not thinking like, I'm not consenting to this, but that's what the nervous system is saying. And that's the point of me sharing all of this with you. It's not for your pity. It's to help you understand that the nervous system has to feel safe. And my nervous system hasn't felt safe probably since I was in utero, but definitely a year old, right? And so I go through high school. I was actually very sick in high school. I had a lot of autoimmune issues. No one really could pinpoint like what was going on. But again, I was in a state of survival all through high school because I was in so much pain that I would come home from school and I would just lay on the bathroom floor and cry and take like 5 baths a day because the heat helped. My bones would just ache so incredibly bad. And so they always said like, oh, she has lupus. Oh, she has autoimmune conditions. Oh, it's because of all the immunoglobulin that I had as a kid. All of these things. And so really what it was is that I was intolerant to gluten and I needed to stop eating gluten, but I didn't quite figure that out until I was about 20 years old. But anyway, so my nervous system didn't feel safe in high school either because I was in so much pain every single day of my life. They was, essentially unbearable. I had mono my senior year of high school, so I was sicker than I've ever been, probably for 2 weeks. So again, it's just like this repetition of my nervous system not feeling safe and nurtured and not having or being given the tools to cope. And that's of no one's fault, right? Again, it was like the 90s and early 2000s where like our parents didn't know that we should probably have therapy for some of these things, right? Or maybe they did, but mine didn't. And I would argue that my mom was actually pretty ahead of the curve. She was studying homeopathy. I wasn't allowed to eat red food coloring like as a kid. So my mom was very aware of holistic medicine and in the world there. So it just was what it was, right? So graduate high school, go to college. For some reason, I was not like a studious, I was not like a studious high schooler, right? I didn't really care about my grades. I like cared about hanging out with my friends and football games on Friday night and like, I don't know, being cool, I guess. So that was not really a thing. But then I go to undergrad and all of a sudden I decide that I'm going to be this biology major. And I was like not a science person whatsoever. I remember like, I don't know. I was just not a studious. I wasn't a bad kid. I just was not studious. And then all of a sudden I decided that I'm going to be a biology major for some reason. And here I am, right? That's just God's work through my life. But so then I go into college and that was extremely stressful. I was not like the smartest kid. I had to work really hard to do well in college. And looking back on that, I'm like, no offense. I have a business degree too. So this is no offense, but I'm like, dang, I wonder like how how college would have been different and so less stressful if I studied like business or English or literature, or like something like that. And again, like no offense to anybody that studied that. That's incredible. We need all those people in the world. I also have a master's in business, so I'm not ditching on business. I love business. It's probably one of the things that excites me most in the world or in life. But it would have just been different. Like studying science in undergrad is not for the faint of heart. Like it is a lot of work and it is very stressful. And so then I remember taking A&P, anatomy and physiology, for the first time. And I remember learning like what you study right before you fall asleep will stick in your brain the best. So I remember setting my alarm like every 15 minutes when I was doing A&P in undergrad. So I would all night long, I would like study for 15 minutes and then I would sleep for 15 minutes. And then I would study for 15 minutes and sleep for 15 minutes for like hours around the clock. And so you can just imagine what that in and of itself did to my nervous system while I was sleeping on a 15-minute timer while I was studying A&P flashcards like in psychosis, right? So college is stressful. Right after college, my husband and I get married. We got married when I was 21. I was like 2 weeks from turning 22. So graduated college, got married right away. That's what I always wanted. So that was beautiful and perfect. And then we started trying for a baby and it wasn't happening. And it wasn't happening. And it wasn't happening. And that was stressful. And then I decided, I was working full time at the time. I was very blessed. I had a great job right out of undergrad, working in food and feed safety. So that science degree came in handy. But then I was like, well, I'm not getting pregnant, so I might as well go back to school. So then I decided to be working full time and enroll in full-time grad school to get my MBA, my master's in business admin from the University of Michigan. And of course, like that's stressful. I'm like staying up super late at night, writing papers and doing all this stuff. And at the same time, wondering why I can't conceive and get pregnant, right? And while there are these medical issues that I know along the way, there was mold in the house we were living in the time, some of these other factors. But when I tell that story, it's so easy, I think, for you to probably see and for myself to look back and be like, oh, like that was really black and white. Like my nervous system never felt safe from the time I was a year old to that time where I'm trying to conceive, right? And I'll also add, like, while I'm also going to grad school trying to conceive, my parents actually filed for divorce again, a second time. And for anyone that has been through this as an adult, so much more stressful and difficult as an adult than it is as a child, right? And I can say that because I've kind of walked this experience twice. And again, my parents reconciled, and I will say, we have so much respect for them for that, and just sticking to the Lord's command and just working really hard for our family, right? But it doesn't mean it hasn't been stressful in my life. And that doesn't mean that it hasn't had an influence in, oh gosh, you guys, I'm going to cry, have an influence in who I am as a person. And I think a lot of people would, let me back up and say that I think when you're walking through these situations sometimes and it's somebody else's experience or somebody else's hardship or somebody else's trauma, even though you're like in this lived experience with them, no one says like, oh, you need support, like you need therapy, you need things to support your nervous system and help you to cope through these things too, right? And so I've always been the type of person who's just like head down, keep pushing, it's going to be fine. Just keep working hard, it's all going to work out, right? And there are just like our times in our lives where like we need support from other people. We need someone to help us walk through these things. And it's not until like really that I probably went to medical school that I really started to heal some of these things and some of these traumatic experiences in my life, because as naturopaths, we are taught motivational interviewing. And so what motivational interviewing is some of my clients are going to be like, oh, that's what she's doing to me. But it's just conversation, and it's just getting to the bottom of it, getting to the root cause, saying like, okay, a lot of people have issues with food, and I always want to know, why do you have issues with food? Like, what's going on here? Like, was food withheld from you as a kid? Were you told that you were overweight as a kid? Were you told that you need to be on a diet at 8 years old? Was there not enough food? Did your family not have enough money to have food available whenever you wanted it, right? So there's like all of these layers of things underneath. So it's like asking deeper questions about these things. So as I'm learning through medical school, because right after I graduated from I graduated in August from grad school for my MBA, and then by December, we moved to Oregon and I started, we'll go back there. I started med school, but through med school, we learned how to kind of dig under some of these things. So I was able to start seeing so many, like having aha moments in my own life, like, oh, I'm this way because of that. And this influenced me this way, right? But the point that I want to make is that my nervous system never felt safe. Clearly, right? I think, again, going through that, you can probably see that my nervous system never felt safe. I was so stuck in this state of sympathetic fight or flight. And if I'm being honest, I'm probably still really stuck in there because my life is still stressful, but that's self-induced because here I am, raising kids and homeschooling and running this business and doing this podcast and all the things. So life is stressful, but in a different way. So I'm probably still stuck in sympathetic. But at the time, it was more important because I was trying to conceive and have babies, right? And so my nervous system was like, no, you're not safe. Like, you're barely surviving. Like, you're in pain all the time. You are stressed out all the time. You cannot cope. Like, all of these things, like bringing a baby into the world, your body's not going to do well with that, right? So my husband and I moved to Oregon. I started med school. And at that point, I think I just needed to escape, right? Because again, probably 23, 24 years old was probably one of the most difficult times of my life when my parents were going to get divorced for the second time. And so I just needed to leave. I needed out of here, right? And my husband had worked at the same job since he was 18, which is beautiful. We own that company now that he worked for, and it's a beautiful little story. But he was like, yes, I need to go explore the world and do something else for a while too, right? Broaden my horizons. And so we did. We packed up and we moved to Oregon, and I tell a lot more of that story in the first episode. But 6 months after we were there, I conceived and got pregnant, and would like to say that we had a healthy baby, and she's healthy and beautiful now, but it was actually a very stressful pregnancy. And I'll get into that on another episode, another day, with her health issues when she was born. But do I think that there's a relation there between the stress and her being born with some health issues? I don't know that I can say yes or no in this moment. I have to give that more thought than I have previously. Is it possible? Yes. Do genetic anomalies just sometimes happen? Also, yes, and that's okay too, right? So 6 months after we left the chaos, and my husband and I were like, okay, we just need to go be our own people, decide who we are for ourselves, right? Because we're also very blessed to live very close to our entire family. At the time, well, even until just a year ago, my children had 7 living great-grandparents. So both sides of our parents, lots of our grandparents, my kids' great-grandparents, our siblings, all live in the same town, essentially. So it was just we need to go. We need to find our own space. We need to do some of our own healing. And this is really what the Lord is calling me to do. I'd been searching for naturopathic medicine for a really long time. So again, I share a lot more of those stories in that first episode. But my nervous system needed to feel safe. It needed to feel safe to reproduce. It needed to feel that this was a safe environment to bring new life into, that my body was safe enough to bring new life, that I could handle that I was healthy enough, that I had enough nutrient storage. And so what I really want to take, to kind of circle this back to how does this apply to you is, does your nervous system feel safe? And I really want you to think about that. Does your nervous system feel safe? Have you walked through a lot of traumatic things, even if they're things that no one else would look at you and be like, oh, that was trauma, or oh, that was emotional abuse, or oh, that was X, Y, and Z, right? I think that we're taught to be tough. We're taught to just suck it up, buttercup, right? Keep on going. And that doesn't protect our soul. That doesn't protect our nervous system. That does not tell our body that we are safe to reproduce, to grow life, to heal, to sleep, to digest our food. All of these things are so important. So I really encourage you to take some time, either pause this right now and think about it, or, finish listening to the episode and come back to this and ask yourself, is my nervous system safe? Especially if you're trying to conceive, right? And I think it's so important for your husband to have this kind of internal dialect or realization for himself too, right? Is his nervous system safe? Because no, he's not carrying the baby, but he's got to have sperm that's good enough to reproduce. And we know that recurrent miscarriages are most commonly due to issues with sperm. And that comes from dad a lot of times. If progesterone looks good, it's usually a male issue. So is dad's nervous system safe enough for him to produce good sperm? Or is the body going to produce sperm with chromosomal abnormalities because it's not safe to reproduce? And that's how epigenetics work. I just encourage you to really spend some time thinking about that. And if you are listening to this episode and you're like, shoot, my nervous system is not safe. Like, I think you're hitting the nail on the head, Dr. Morris. Like, I think this might be a big piece of the journey for me. There's so much that we can do to support you in healing your nervous system, right? You can always reach out to my team. You can always DM me Fertility on Instagram. You can always send us an email. But also, like, maybe you need some therapy, right? Maybe you need some tools. Maybe you need some nutrients to help your adrenals heal. A lot of times people think that their cortisol is high. Like if they're in a really stressful state, they think that their cortisol is high, but 9 times out of 10, their cortisol is actually low. So our cortisol will be high for a certain amount of time, which is probably a shorter duration than you think. And then it just crashes. And it's like, peace, you're on your own. Like, I can't keep up anymore. So cortisol is just in the tank, and that's where like the fatigue comes in at nighttime or even mid-afternoon. You know, a lot of that fatigue, we're like, I'm super stressed, but I'm so tired, like I can't even function. And that's when cortisol is low. So you may need some like herbs to help nourish your adrenals. You may need some of the lifestyle things. Maybe there's some environmental toxins that are making the stress worse, right? So there's so much that we can do to support you. And I just really encourage you, like, reach out. Like if you don't want to reach out to me, that's okay too. Like just find somebody that resonates with you that can support you in healing your nervous system and helping your body to feel safe. And this is whether you're trying to conceive and get pregnant, or if you're trying to heal a gut issue, or you have migraines, like whatever it is, these symptoms are red flags from your body telling you that something's going on. We need to dig deeper, right? Like you just don't get a headache for no reason. If you have a headache, that's a red flag from your body saying like, hey, there's stress or there's toxicity or there's inflammation or like something's going on and we need to get to the bottom of it, right? We don't have diarrhea for no reason. We have diarrhea because we're stressed, because we have dysbiosis, because we have infections in our gut, whatever it is. Like we got to get to the bottom of that, right? And the nervous system is just so integral in all of these things. So there's connection between our hormones and our nervous system. There's connections between our gut and our nervous system. Your gut is where most of your neurotransmitters are formed. So historically speaking, it was taught and believed in medicine that our neurotransmitters that make us happy and creative and kind of like overarchingly control like anxiety and depression are made in the brain, but they're not. They're made in the gut. Like 90% of your serotonin, dopamine, all of these different neurotransmitters are made in the gut. So if your nervous system is out of balance or your gut is out of balance, that's going to influence your nervous system, and your nervous system is going to be even more out of balance. So you might be in a state where your nervous system doesn't feel safe because of your lived experiences, but then we got a gut infection from something we ate, or maybe we have parasites or whatever it is, and now we're not making our neurotransmitters, and the neurotransmitters are not going up the vagus nerve to the brain. And so now the brain is like even more in a stressed out state, or now maybe we've had all this traumatic lived experience and now we have anxiety or depression because our gut is not healthy enough to give us the neurotransmitters we need to cope and be resilient and kind of work through some of these things. So the point is that the body is so interconnected. It's not just individual systems. And I just want you to be very aware of your nervous system. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully that made some connections for you. If you're a parent and you're listening to this, hopefully that gives you some insight of how you can better support your children in some of the experiences that they've gone through, right? When kids go through traumatic things, they might not be able to vocalize this to you. They don't have the emotional intelligence yet that's needed to really be able to vocalize how they're feeling and what they're going through, right? Something that really helps in our family, I'll share with you, with my kiddos, is we share a rose and a thorn every night before we go to bed. So what was your rose, the best thing of your day? And what was your thorn, the hardest thing? And this has been such a beautiful experience. Like even do this with yourself or with your husband, if you don't have little ones yet, because when you're doing it with little ones, it really helps to identify like what are the hard things they're going through that they don't know how to express to you. So for example, like one of my girls might say like, I really didn't like when my sister said this to me today. But if I wouldn't have asked them their thorn at the end of the night, this would have never come to the surface. They don't know how to express it, right? So they kind of just stuff that emotion and move on. And that allows us to have a really beautiful conversation of like, oh, let's talk about that. Like, why did your sister say this to you? How did it make you feel when your sister said this to you? When your sister says this to you next time, how are you going to respond? And we can practice things like, it really hurts my feelings when you say that to me and it's unkind. Please don't say that to me again. Or that really hurts my feelings. I'm not going to tolerate you saying that to me again. I deserve to be respected, right? So this gives us opportunities to teach our children how to handle situations in the future, but also for ourselves. Like maybe you're one of those people who feels like, gosh, in these situations, like when someone says something rude to me, I just don't know what to say, or I say something and then I feel stupid and I mull over it every night for the next 5 nights. I'm not going to sleep because I said this stupid thing for 2 seconds that no one else is going to remember, right? But it allows us to kind of like recheck the day and say like, okay, this happened. Here's how I'm going to address this next time. So it's not hijacking my nervous system and my safety essentially for the next week or 2 weeks or so on and so forth. So again, I hope this has been helpful. I hope this has just been an opportunity for you to say like, aha, I can put some of these pieces together, or I've never given enough credit to the nervous system and how much impact it has on my life. So that is one of the most significant root causes that I see in health in general, but especially in fertility, in the world of infertility when people are trying to consume, is does your nervous system say and feel that you are safe enough to reproduce, grow life, bring another human into the world, and take care of that human, right? So for some people, like, work may be really stressful. You might leave at 5 o'clock in the morning and get home at 7 o'clock at night. And so subconsciously, your body's like, how do you have time for a baby? Like, a baby doesn't fit into your life if you leave at 5 in the morning and get home at 7 o'clock at night. Like, it's just not possible, right? So just your experiences may not be the same as mine. They may be different, but they may still be having an impact on your nervous system. So do I feel safe? Is there space in my life for a baby? Like, do I have my life set up and constructed in a way that a baby could come into the world, into my life with ease, right? So these are some of the questions that I really challenge you to start asking yourselves if you are trying to conceive. So I mentioned that I was going to talk about many of the root causes that I see for infertility, but I've been yapping at you for quite some time now. So let me just briefly touch on some of these other root causes. I'm not going to go deep into them like I did the nervous system. I really want this episode to be about that, especially since I talked about that at such length with you. I really want you to hone into that and lean into that. But if that is maybe not something that resonates with you, I would really encourage you to ask yourself, do I have nutrient deficiencies? Do I have a provider? I guess step back first. Do I have a provider that can determine if I have nutrient deficiencies? Do I have nutrient deficiencies? Why do I have nutrient deficiencies? Is it a lack of nutrition in my food, or is it that I can't absorb them in my gut? Maybe there's a gut issue going on. I would encourage you to look into your hormonal health, starting with the liver. If there was one organ that I would say has the most authority over your fertility, and really your health in general, it'd be the liver. The liver has hundreds of jobs. It detoxes our hormones. It regulates so much is happening. It's our garbage can, right? It's like the filter that gets all the junk out of the body. So honing in on supporting your liver is so important in this process as well. So how is your liver health? I would ask, in terms of hormones, like, are your hormones behaving appropriately? And this is where a Dutch analysis comes in. And this is why I love a Dutch so much. So we do a Dutch on all of our clients in the fertility formula. If this is something that you're interested in, again, of course, you can always reach out, but you can also get a Dutch through my Rupa store. So we'll drop the link in the show notes for the Rupa store, but you can order that on yourself for yourself that way. So it allows us to see, like, how is your body producing hormones through your entire cycle? Is your estrogen up when it should be up and down when it should be down? Same thing with progesterone. How is cortisol, your stress hormone, influencing your reproductive hormones? This is the most granular, deepest way for us to have a look at your hormones and how your body is utilizing them. So we can see, like, are your hormones behaving appropriately? If not, we've got to dig in and say, why not? Is there an environmental exposure? Is the nervous system unsafe? Is cortisol unbalanced? Do you have infections? And this is what we're doing every day, right? Is taking the information from the Dutch and going a level deeper and saying, what is going on in your environment, in your body, that's causing your hormones to behave the way that they are, and how do we address that, right? So that's another big piece of the puzzle as well. And again, it's just not as complex as the conventional medical model lays it out for it to be, right? Infections is another big one. So do you have mold toxicity? Do you have parasites? Do you have tick-borne illness? Do you have viruses? We could have a whole conversation about viruses and their existence and what that really looks like. But for the sake of time, let's just say viruses in this moment. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. Maybe we'll do an episode about viruses one day. When I'm thinking infections, I'm going to walk you through one more thought process that's also deep, and you might have to think hard about it. So prepare yourself. Put your thinking hat back on. When someone asks me, what is the root cause of illness? I would say the root cause of illness is infections. Is, again, mold, parasites, bacteria, viruses, any environmental toxins, like that's an infection too, right? That's something that shouldn't be in your body. So anything that's taking up space in your body and living in your body, rent-free, essentially. But why can you and I be in the same exact environment or live in the same home that maybe has mold and it affects me, but it doesn't affect you? Or how can we both be in the same place or both be bit by the same tick and you get Lyme disease and I don't, right? And it comes back to that bucket. It comes back to our epigenetics. It comes back to emotional toxicities. And so while I say the root cause of all illness is infectious, below that, it's our lived emotional experiences, because our emotions are stored in different organ systems. And this is a Chinese medicine concept. I'm not a Chinese medicine expert by any stretch of the imagination. I just see these patterns, and I have for over a decade, right? We know that the liver holds anger, the lungs hold grief, the kidneys hold worry, especially about money. The heart is often affected in someone that has is hard-hearted. They have a hard heart, right? Like they're not easily loved. They don't take in love easy. They don't express love easily. So when we have certain emotional experiences, maybe you have an emotional experience and it makes you angry. So that's going to then manifest. I hate that word, but that word is used in scripture. But I think that word is given very new age undertones now. And so I try to avoid using that word, but sometimes it's just the word that seems applicable for what you're trying to explain. So you have an experience. It creates a lot of anger, right? Maybe this anger is even subconscious. Maybe it's something you suppressed and you haven't thought about this anger in decades, right? But now this anger has damaged your liver, and now that is going to show up. And so now maybe you come in contact with Epstein-Barr virus or mono, right? And that really affects your liver because your liver is already compromised from the emotional state that you were originally in, and hasn't been healed, right? Or maybe another example is like you've experienced grief, death of a loved one, and then later on in life you go on to develop COPD or lung cancer or some other lung issue. And it's like, well, we were both smokers. So why did you get COPD and I didn't get COPD? Well, you had that emotional grief and I didn't, right? And so you've been harboring that emotional trauma in your lungs for 20 years. So just giving you examples of how infections cause illness, but why do you get the infection and I don't, or vice versa? And that's our emotional lived experiences. So hopefully that's helpful. I have dumped a lot of really deep thought-provoking things on you today. At least I think I have. Maybe you disagree and that's okay too. So I'm going to leave you with that. I would love for you to just spend some time diving into what emotional experiences have I had? Are these emotional experiences negatively affecting my nervous system? And what emotional experiences have I had that are affecting certain organ systems? And how is that manifesting into disease in my body, right? So again, I'm going to leave you with that. As always, it's great hanging out with you. I love chatting with you. I love informing you. I'm always open to new ideas and topics and things. So if there is something that you would really love for me to cover, someone that you would love for me to interview, as always, please just reach out. The easiest place to reach me is Instagram, dr.Nichole Morris. Nichole has an H in it. You can always reach me there. I'm always the one in my DMs. I don't have people that manage that for me at this point. So you will get me if you send me a message there. I just hope and pray that this episode was helpful for you, brings you some enlightenment, and I will catch you on the next one. Have a great day. Thanks for hanging out with me on today's episode of Prescribing the Truth. If you loved our chat, you can find me on all the socials. Come say hi on Instagram at dr.Nichole Morris. And don't forget, I drop exclusive content on YouTube every week, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Also, I've got to tell you, if you are in need of high-quality, research-backed supplements, check out shopdrmorris.com for my full line of third-party tested, USA-made products. My Prenatal Plus is top of the line for fertility support, and if you've got little ones, grab a bottle of Kids Complete too. Lastly, if you and your husband are trying to conceive naturally without IUI or IVF, my team and I would love to support you, pray with you, and walk this journey with you. Just head over to drnicholemorris.com. That's Dr. Nichole Morris, Nichole with an H, to book a preconception consultation with me. Thanks for joining me today. Stay informed and God bless.